Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the new Sword and Shield expansion, go ahead and get your codes over at the Potown store. You can also use the code OmniPoke for an extra 5% discount on your orders. For today's video, we're having a short break from the Sword and Shield stuff. I hope you are enjoying it, but there are a couple more tournaments that I do want to discuss from sort of the end of the Ultra Prism Cosmic Eclipse format. Now, obviously, we can't read into this too much. The format is coming to a close. Maybe there are a few cups for you guys left to take inspiration for some of these lists, but it still can set up some things for future tournaments, especially the Sao Paulo, the second place list. I really want to delve into a bit more detail, and the first and second place lists here, because here it's Baby Blacephalon, which looks to get stronger with Lucky Egg and Sword and Shield. And for the Sao Paulo second place list, I believe it is, it's a Mewtwo Malamar deck, which we know seems to be a big contender in the Sword and Shield format from Japanese results. So yeah, I really think it's worth looking at these tournament results still, just to give us a good basis of what a pre-Sword and Shield list looks like and how it might be adapting. As well as, giving the shout-outs that are due for doing well in these tournaments. So let's start with the Bochum Regionals over in Germany. 659 Masters. And it was won by Stefan Ivanov with his Greens Blacephalon deck. He was able to beat Brennan in the finals, who was playing a Blacephalon Birds list. So both Baby Blound list, making it all the way to the finals. I think in this format, the archetype was kind of under-respected a lot of the time, and it's taken a while for it to do this well. We saw the Birds Blacephalon get 9th place in LATAM. Had it have got top 8 rather than bubbling at 9th, maybe the popularity would have been closer to where it could have been, or perhaps should have been. But in this tournament, we saw fairly dominant, really, and it's even come second place in a previous special event in Europe as well. So there's definitely some credit where it's due for this sort of archetype. And Stefan's list looks pretty straightforward, which I think is the best way to try and play this archetype, because the straightforwardness of the deck is its biggest win condition, because it's simply a one prizer that up trades. That's like just bread and butter good, basically. So it's just got the attackers. That's all you really need. It doesn't have the Pheromosa pivot that sometimes you can use. You can just sort of grab that off the Ultra Space and have yourself a nice option to protect a Blacephalon and stuff like that. But, the Pheromosa takes up a space in its own right, so there's reasons to not play the card, of course. But we've seen that in a handful of previous other builds. It's got the 4 greens, it's got the 4 welders, and it also plays 1 copy of Rosa, which I think is quite nice. It opens up the door for these beast rings to become much better cards. It can obviously grab you a physical energy and your next attacker as well. So even though the Rosa's a one-of, I can see the validity behind it. It's a decent mid-game play, especially because you don't always need the beast ring. Sometimes you can just grab the crystal and stuff as well. So yeah, then it's just 4 ofs of crystal and flint, obviously, customs, acrobikes and gears, the consistency things you can play. The one card that I look at that looks like an outlier to me is Cherish Ball. I think if you're already playing 3 Ultra Space, Cherish Ball is pretty odd to me. It doesn't actually sound that good. Yes, you can play around Chaotic Swell a bit better and not die to a Swell, I guess. Maybe if if you didn't have Cherish Ball and someone did lay a Swell down on you and you only had 1 basic in play, Cherish Ball is the best option for you. So that's the main reason why it probably plays a Cherish Ball, just so you don't instantly lose to having 1 basic and just Ultra Space being options. Fortunately, in the new meta, you don't have to play the Cherish Ball. So I can see why it was played as a one-of. It does sort of give you a bit of protection against really, really bad situations and defending against donks, which is one of the deck's kind of biggest issues. So yeah, the Cherish Ball may seem weird out the gate and doesn't seem like a strong card, but it stops you losing games. So it's probably just good enough. And everything else, again, looks pretty normal. So yeah, just a very straightforward Green Blounds list with not necessarily good card in the deck, but one that defends against donks. So that's actually a cool card to see in the list, really, even though it doesn't seem that strong in a vacuum. Brennan's list, let's take a look at the alternate route, which is the Pidgeotto build. I think this is the one that more people have sort of played in tournaments and such. It is the one that got 9th in Latin America. Obviously, it comes with bigger weakness to Mewtwo and Mew doing spread stuff, and a bigger weakness to the Malamar matchup, but you're a lot more stable. You have Elms for consistency to get the lads out, and then the birds start airmailing into the rest of the stuff. So it's a different approach. It's probably a little bit slower to get rolling. I imagine that's why, even though I've had the advantage in the finals, I haven't actually gone back and watched the finals yet, I'll be honest about that. Because when I saw it was two baby Blowns, I was like, yeah, it's just going to be a back and forth anyways. But I think you can see why this was potentially unfavored in a mirror match situation. But, you know, you don't have that constant fear of donks or reset stamp at like any point in the game. So I can also see, obviously, a lot of validity behind this list. Going forward, Elm is a lot worse in the format where you can't go first and use it. Maybe you could still play this list if you just choose to go second whenever you have the option to go second, and it still has good uptrade potential. We also get the good old energy retrievals in the new set, and potentially Lucky Egg as well if you can make spaces for those. So those are cards that you might want to explore putting into both this list and the greens list for sure, just for more reload potential. But yeah, Baby Loun's doing good work, just hitting hard and winning prize races. We saw a bit of a comeback with pikarom as well. It got top 4 in Bochum and also did fairly well in Sao Paulo. So let's see the return of pikarom. Obviously, I've been a fan of pikarom in the past. Let's get this all on one screen because it's got a lot going on here. But this list only plays one Dedenne GX, and it actually favors a heavier tag call package rather than having the radar package. Really, it plays one copy just for like Volkner outs, but ultimately you're not that Dedenne GX focused because you don't want to put down too many things for low puff, and you're just relying on this tag call engine instead to get access to opening attackers as well as some key pieces, notably the Guzma and Hala. It's a really important one-of in the deck because it can grant you access to the mountain. So going like on turn 2, as long as there's no Swell in play, this mountain can be insane. Also, it plays the Marshallow to help out against Swell anyways. So, yeah, I like the tackle include. I actually tested this. I was thinking of going to a bunch of cups, and I was going to take pikarom like maybe a month and a half ago, something like that. Like pretty early on in this Cosmic Eclipse format, because obviously I'd done well with pikarom pre-Cosmic Eclipse, and I still wanted to keep playing pikarom, basically. So, I've tried a list like this, and I really did appreciate the strength of the Guzhala and Malolana coming in as well as a nice healing option, which is surprisingly good in pikarom as well, even though you're not naturally that tanky. You can see he's tried to supplement it with the Choice Helmet, again, leaning into that Guzhala package as best you can. So yeah, I think that's really cool. Nothing else really stands out too much. The stadium count has gone away from labs because Guardian often cut away from lightning charm at this point, so you could get away with labs to improve your Mewtwo matchup and also get through Keldeo, of course. So that's another reason why the Marshallow's in here, not just for swelling or like against Swell for the mountain, it's against Swell, so you could power plant against Keldeo. So yeah, the stadium count is an obvious choice. The wait and see hammer is a bit of a weird card for me. Yes, you can Volkner for it. Yes, it's insane against ADP, but it's a card that's bad 50% of your games just naturally. So I don't know. Yes, it's a pretty good anti-tempo option against ADP. So if the matchup's big enough, I guess that's fine. But at the same time, your hand needs to be good enough to where actually I guess just going turn 1 Volkner attach and then wait and see hammer's good enough, because you can just try and get like Guzhala and stuff the following turn. Maybe it is good enough just to make that ADP much more favorable. And it's not like the worst card to use against a few other decks as well. So yeah, it's nice to see the tag call package of pikarom, and it's pretty much an adaptation that we've seen in Japan as well. The tag call package pretty much belongs in pikarom going forward, I think. So yeah, I would expect to see a similar sort of approach going on here. You can sub out these judges for Marnies and basically do a copy paste of this list if you want to, with potentially the addition of things like Coco V. And there's not much else you need to change. Maybe like Oranguru as well, but you don't even have that much discard in this list. You don't play any Magnolias, you just have Cynthia. So yeah, you could just sort of run with this, change some of the ball search to adding quick balls, change the Choice Helmet to a charm, and you could just keep rocking with this if you wanted to. So that's certainly an option for this sort of archetype. let's go on to the other top 4 list, which is Pedro with ADP, classic ADP. Now, as the format went on, a lot of people moved away from classic ADP just to play things like Bird Trio, Buzzmosa, like Green's ADP, all sorts of different builds out there. But Pedro just stayed with his guns. I think you'll notice something about Pedro is that he will play a deck until it's literally unplayable anymore. He likes to just become an expert with one deck, and it's one of the things he attributes to doing so well in tournaments. So he picked up ADP at the start of Cosmic Eclipse, hasn't put it down. You can see he's added in some tech cards. He's got the 1/1 Ninetales, so you can beat Guardian, which is pretty cool. Also, it can be relatively okay in like Mirror as well. Not that you really get it out too much, but you have the Mimikyu anyway for Mirror, which is cool. You have that Giraffe rig, so you can try and get lost some Mewtwo attackers. So you can try and, again, stick the wall, the Keldeo, in the way just to ruin their day. It's got the Rosa supporter line. He's choosing Lilies over Cynthia's. He's a big advocate of Lily, actually. I think he was, even at the start of the Cosmic Eclipse format. I think even in LATAM, he played Lilies over Cynthia's. There's nothing else, again, that stands out too much. Everything looks pretty standard from there. It's playing the counter gain, no defensive tool, like no choice helmet, just playing like the response sort of card. You've got that one physical fairy energy in here just for the Rosa synergy, but nothing else stands out at that point. It's like, it's very normal ADP. It's just the ingenuity is really in like these 3 cards. We'd seen Mimikyu in a handful of Rosa builds, but a lot of the Rosa builds didn't play the physical fairy. They just relied on like rainbows. So having, getting the Mimikyu more consistently with a counter gain combo as well just seems pretty reasonable to me. Yeah, very solid ADP list, and it was still good at the end of the format. It's just people had decided to try other wacky stuff. Brian as well, our LATAM finalist, coming back and playing, I believe it's the same 60 that he played. Yeah, you can see. He literally played the same 60. He was like, I did well with it before, I can do well again. And he did. So yeah, he just stuck with something that he knows and carried him far. I'm sure a lot of people have tested this exact 60 at this point a decent amount of times. A lot of people move towards a lower Dedenne count. A lot of people move towards adding in things like Breakzard. But Brian just sticking with what he knows and doing really well again. So he's clearly a talented Mewtwo player and happy with his 60 the first time around. So why change? We saw a very interesting fossil deck as well. Finally reached top 8. I know there's been a few people championing this archetype for a while. I know Tobias Teesing, he's been playing fossils in a lot of regional tournaments over in Europe and other events as well. But it actually wasn't him who was able to break into the top 8, but the archetype did. And there's some cool stuff going on in here for sure. The Rampardos, it can do that wild crash attack that just knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon. Yeah, just straight up, as long as it's a basic. So yeah, it's a 3 energy attack cost. It's expensive, but you do have ways to try and cheat that energy cost that you'll see in a second. So yeah, that's the whole idea. You're just trying to like wild crash twice to try and win, basically. Yeah, you got the Karate Belt, so you basically are happy to go behind on prizes. You naturally will when you're a stage 2 deck anyway, and you spend your first couple turns using that research lab, and you just try and sacrifice Jirachis in those opening turns. And you also have these 2 E-switches. I think E-switch is a really clever addition to the deck because it means you don't have to ever commit too much to one Rampardos. You can spread your energies out, and it makes your opponent, A, think that they have more time than they do, and B, if they have their custom catchers, you don't just get instantly wrecked and run out of energy cards. So those E-switches are really, really smart additions to the list. I think those are low-key, like, kind of breaking the deck. Those E-switches are crazy good. You can obviously see Super Boost as well being a huge include in the deck. Obviously, it was always in the list, but it's a big selling point that, again, it may feel like you're sort of out of range of attacking them, but you can just drop the Super Boost and win the game. It's got the double Goose Howler, so you have really good access to your stadium early on, as well as that Super Boost, and even like the tools for your Jirachis and for responding on the opponent. The Cyrus Prism Star is very interesting. I'm sure it does help out against Malamar and controlling matchups as well, so that could be pretty cool. The Aerodactyl GX is also good against the controlling matchups because, well, at least Oranguru can't chain Instruct as much as it would like, and Articuno GX can't get around. Well, it can't just come in for one water energy. It's got to steal more waters, with the Primal Winds effect. So you get a bit of protection against Oranguru there, which is pretty nice. I don't think you're naturally that strong against control. I think if you wanted to have a better control matchup, you could consider maybe an Omastar line to have a bit of a better time. But in general, it's good at just punishing heavy tag team focused decks, right? And Cyrus can come in clutch against like Mali and stuff. The Caracosta ability is really annoying for Malamar as well. You shut down their spell tags, you shut down their Jirachi. Like Caracosta is good against all sorts of Jirachi-based builds as well, just shutting down a skateboard. So yeah, you've got some big damage output available to you with the GX attack of Wild Dive as well as just knocking out basics, like no questions asked. So yeah, pretty fun, aggressive. Well, not really aggressive, but like damage, or not even damage, but just like being a one prizer. It's similar to the Baby Blounce concept, right? Where you just need to attack like 2 times and you win sometimes. Yesper's got a really interesting build of Pidgeotto control. Now, I don't know how much of a fan I am of his list. There's a lot of wackiness going on. I know he'll testify that this is the optimal 60 and any other decision or any change I suggest is going to be incorrect. But there's definitely some intrigue here. He's got the Magneton. The Magneton was kind of touted as like a mirror tech card for a long time. So that you can force Surge and your opponent can't, basically, which is kind of cool. Also, it can actually get people off the Baby Blown turn and stuff like that, which is also like a mini niche that it can have. But potentially it's too late, and you can't really sit there with a Ditto anyway. Your opponent probably should go for that regardless. Or like you can evolve into this and just sit there, but obviously your opponent will see what you're doing. But yeah, like it can be nice in some niches. I think it's mainly for mirror matches, not much else really. One thing I hate is one Articuno GX. The card is super important. So important that some lists play like the 2 copies and then play like Misty and Lorelei to try and reuse that Cold Crush. So 1 for me just doesn't float my boat. I think almost every game that's part of your game plan. So I don't like that being a one-off copy at all. I know that you don't want to prize a lot of things with this list, but Articuno certainly seems like an integral piece. Also, the list, as you obviously can tell, is not a Jirachi-based build. Instead, it's favoring a higher support account, but it's more like a versatility package than like just raw consistency supporters. Like he's just playing 1 additional fan club. Obviously, the fan club could get you access to like the monkey, the Articuno, the Giraffe rig a little bit quicker, which is okay. It's got a Rosa in here as well. I'm not like opposed to that, but his energy count is actually like pretty high. Sometimes you would just see like a 3-2 or a 3-1 even sometimes. So it feels like accessing water energy shouldn't be too big of an issue. So I think Rosa, like, yes, it's obviously a fine card in the deck, but when you're not playing a Jirachi package, I kind of like this to be another Hapu over Rosa, just to be more proactive, personally. But the first thing I would do is just make space for another Articuno. So I'm just offering up suggestions for spaces if you want to. Everything else looks okay, really. I'm not really against many other things at this point, but we've seen Jirachi packages certainly weave into the deck. It's interesting that he's opted to have like a second copy of Jesse James over like a second copy of Articuno. Many lists just play 1 JJ instead, you know, and say that if that's prize, you can at least Surge Mars them instead. So yeah, it's an interesting approach for sure. But different to what we've seen so far, and Jesper's made it work at least. Raz has once again top-8'd a tournament in this format, or actually, I don't know if he top-8'd in this format before, but he's a frequent top cutter in European tournaments, and he's also playing Mewtwo. He's got himself the Rainbow Energy build that has the Greninja as his like Keldeo answer. He's got all 3 Charizards going on in here. It's got the double Malolana for some healing. I think a lot of Mewtwo players have pushed to like 2 and sometimes even 3 copies of Malolana. It became like an integral piece. There's not too much else to say. The stadium count is offering a swell in here rather than having anything like Marshadow. Obviously, it's just playing Cherish Balls and Tag Calls, no treasures, no like baby Mewtwo or anything like that. It's just playing the swell to try and deny power plants. So yeah, it's a relatively standard Mewtwo as well, not too dissimilar to other lists out there. Obviously his is a unique 60, but it's all becoming, well, Mewtwo was kind of narrowing into a similar path towards the end, I would say. And yeah, that rounds out the top 8 there. So you can also see a great pie chart from Complexity Card Gaming. Go ahead and check them out on Facebook, of course. We still love doing these graphics. The Sao Paulo one's still yet to come out, so just keep an eye out for that. But yeah, you get to see a better breakdown of the day 2. There was 72 decks in day 2, including some wild cards. One of our very own TCG was playing Tangrowth, so he made it in. Jack was playing Mewtwo, so he was one of the 18% that made day 2. You can see pikarom had a huge resurgence, really. People kind of low-key hyped the deck, like, eventually, but, like, coming into Cosmic Eclipse, everyone was afraid of playing this archetype. They thought it just died with Swell and with lack of Keldeo answers and stuff like that, but as you can see, the ADPs have sort of, like, diversified. There's, like, a chunk that were Keldeo-based, there was a chunk that were Greens-based. There were people trying out the build that had Bird Trio and all that other stuff, so as ADP diversified, there was less need to counter Keldeo. Obviously, you still tried to play counter to Keldeo, but you were less concerned. And this was also the deck that played the highest amount of Swells. And then as people were diversifying to, again, Greens and Birds lists, they were playing Power Plants instead. So pikarom had a much safer matchup spread a lot of the time. And because Guardian had stopped teching for pikarom for the most part, because pikarom fell out of favor, you sort of got a good matchup on the sly just because the Guardian had cut their techs for this matchup. So potentially, this was like the only tournament where pikarom could do well, and then Guardian just has to make the spaces again for the lightning charms. So just something to bear in mind. But yeah, that's the pie if you want to take a look at that. Let's have a look at the Sao Paulo top 8 now. And you can see that Guardian actually won the tournament. This was a 550 master event right at the end of Jan, just a few days ago. And it was Gardevoir Sylveon that was able to win. I like the fact that they've cut away from Omastar control, although it did make top 8 in Bochum with Jesper. I think ultimately things like Dolls were adapting, and the Pidgeotto control matchup wasn't really a top 5 sort of deck in the format, in my own opinion, or like in the stats of decks doing well. So just making those cuts and gaining more consistency spaces, I think a lot of the time made a lot of sense. This list actually did choose to play the Lightning Charm. This was obviously a tournament after Bochum, so you can see that the Lightning Charms made their way back into the list. It also played an Island Challenge Amulet, which is pretty wild. I was never really a huge fan of this whenever I tested Guardian. I enjoyed playing things like Choice Helmet for potential mirrors and for the Tina Chomp matchup, and I also liked playing Dragon Charm, again, just for that Tina Chomp matchup. It does play the Great Potion to improve Tina Chomp, but obviously Roxy Chomp started to become a thing, so I don't think the Great Potion's actually like that amazing as like a one-of. I could certainly see you trying to add in a different Charm or a Choice Helmet over the Challenge Amulet. It's just not a card that I personally enjoy. But everything else here is pretty straightforward. It's got a couple of its own swells, which is a bit of an outlier, really. You normally just see like straight up power plants because you're so concerned about Keldeo. But playing a couple of swells to maybe protect your charms, maybe they were expecting some labs to come back into the format or something like that, is also certainly something that you can give credit to. But yeah, other than that, it's a very straightforward Gardevoir Sylveon. I think the archetype is still pretty solid just because it does have those tools for Mewtwo that you can come to expect. If you want to tech for Pikarom, you can. If you want to tech for the Dragon decks, you can. And the Choice Helmet is like versatile enough that it can help mirror and the Dragon decks. So that's also pretty cool. So yeah, I think Guardian was just decent overall in this format, and it had decent results like a lot of the time. So it's not too surprising to see it get top again. We see the very interesting Mewtwo Malamar deck that I alluded to earlier on in the video. And we've definitely seen hints of this deck we've seen more than hints. We've seen this deck be pretty dominant, actually, in the Sword and Shield format. One of the decks that had the most top cut placements in that large Japanese tournament. I believe it was the ADP Zacian deck that had the most top cuts. I think it's then followed by the Mewtwo. So I think those two decks seem to be like front runners in the Sword and Shield format, but Pedro didn't want to wait. He just wanted to play this deck earlier, and there's some really interesting choices here. There's no Dedenne in a list that's Mewtwo when you want to have discard synergies for all of your attackers, which feels really wild for me. yes, you're maximizing that Jirachi count, but having no Dedenne is pretty crazy. It also plays like no Cherish Ball. It's just going for Treasure, Com, and Tag Call as your search outs. So the searching outs are pretty wild to me. I would expect, like, if I was going to start testing this deck, I'd definitely consider adding in at least one Dedenne, possibly like two, just like how we see Welder builds of Mewtwo. But in fairness, it does play a really high support count. It plays the 4 Lily and 4 Cynthia, more similar to like a regular Malamar 60, I guess you could say. It's got that double Mallow Lana for healing, which is nice, and it's got Sinlin for some extra like discard synergy, I guess. It's got those 3 Viridians, so I guess it's just Viridian and Treasures, which are your main discarding options, as well as like Mallow Lanas and stuff. But it's not a huge amount of discard synergy for your Mewtwo attackers. That's a low-key kind of concern for me. I feel like you kind of want a few more, because not only do you want your energies in the discard, but also your Pokemon, of course. So maybe a few discard synergy cards, maybe just working in some Cherish Balls into the mix could be okay. But yeah, we've seen this archetype do pretty well. That obviously in the new format we have Marnie and Trevenoir. In this list we're just playing one reset stamp. We're not playing anything like Judge or anything like that. I could certainly consider one Judge coming into the list when you are playing Sinlin anyway. So potentially one Cynthia could become a Judge, or making a space elsewhere could be an avenue for thought. Also, there's the debate around Ultra Necrozma. Is it better or worse than just playing like a Dragonite or something like that? Or even having no low puff in the list is another like talking point, really. I know obviously people can play around low puff a little bit, as whereas the Dragonite and the Ultra do more versatile damage. I think obviously the benefits of Ultra is that you gain Sky Scorching Light. The downside is you have to work in Metal Energies into your list, which can make life more awkward when you're trying to Poltergeist and when you're trying to Night Watch as well. So that can be like the headache of playing the Ultra Necrozma build. So it depends how clunky this ends up being to know for sure whether Ultra is better than Dragonite. So I'm still pretty much like sat on the fence for which is better. When you're not playing Dedenne, you don't actually have that much like great access to cards. That I think that's the first thing I see when I see this list. I'm like, where's Dedenne, man? It's a Mewtwo deck. You want discard everywhere, and also you want to just have more stuff in play. Like you want to access double Inkay and have another Mewtwo. So yeah, that's something that I would like to see personally. If I was going to be adapting this list, potentially like another Stamp or another Judge, or like a Judge in the list, and then trying to work in a Dedenne. I feel like just like regular Mali has never played for, well, some have played for Jirachi, but it's never like mandatory to play for. Maybe you could just like cut a Jirachi for a Dedenne and just have a different option. Could be fine. That's just my 2 cents, but it's a good omen that we see this deck doing well in Standard right now, when you basically have like half of the things that you have for the Sword and Shield format. You're not playing Quick Ball, which is extra discard synergy as well, by the way. And you don't have Marnie, one of the biggest combos that you have with Night Watch. So it's a really good omen for this archetype to be pretty strong in the new format. So that's a really interesting second place list there. Control actually did really, really well in Brazil. We see 2 Pidgeotto control lists, one making top 4, one making top 8. And then Gustavo Wada also making top 8 with a Pidgeotto Lus Oranguru control. I imagine this is something similar to Sanders, in that it's playing a Greens engine. I'm not sure if it's playing all the Cataday stuff and stuff like that, you know. Unfortunately, we can't see a list. That's often the case with Gustavo. He likes to keep them to himself, which is, you know, fair enough, of course. But yeah, it's interesting. And at least you have Sanders as reference for a Greens-based controlling list out there. So to round out the top 8, we see another Mewtwo list. This is a Welder-based build, of course. And again, it's just playing the tag call stuff, everything that we're coming to expect. It's playing the Swell and the 2 Hearth. So again, a lot of people, well, a good amount of people are trying to just play Swell rather than playing Marshadow instead, especially when you're not playing Treasures. It feels like the Marshadow is just too random compared to the Swell, which is at least Guzhallerable. So it's got a really thick tag call package, the 3 and the 2/2. Sometimes you see as low as like 2/1/1. So yeah, pretty heavy on that front. It's got the bikes. Yeah, pretty standard overall. Seems decent to me. And it looks like Greninja GX is winning out over the Turtonator as the tech attacker of choice, by the way. Just a little thing I thought I'd mention. We see another Pikarom do well. making top 8. This is also a tackle build, so looks like people have seen the tackle list and are more or less happy to just keep playing that same thing. Compared to the previous 60 that we saw, it plays a second copy of the Dene, which is obviously fine, and isn't playing any copies of Judge, so it's got less hand disruption options. It's just got the 2 reset stamps, and it's got a higher focus on the Dene, which is obviously still fine. The Dene is very good, and there are plenty of matchups where you're not getting punished for putting down too many GX Pokemon. There's a bit of an anti-synergy, though, of you wanting to play Power Plants and the Denes. Obviously, mainly Power Plants in here for, like, exactly Mewtwo and exactly Keldeo, so it's not, like, a huge headache, but just stadium bouncing stuff in general can be handy. So you do have to have a bit of a tightrope in this list, where you do have a bit of reliance on your own Zeraora and your own Dedenes, so just something to bear in mind. Maybe in those matchups you can just chill with your Marshadow on the bench for yourself just to deactivate your Power Plant. Always an option. So yeah, another nice tactical build of Pikarom. It seems to have found its way, and this list isn't playing the wait and see hammer either, so clearly it can still win games against ADP without the anti-tempo tool that it has available to it. And then finally, we do see a greens build from William making the top 8. He's playing that same little Mimikyu and the Fair Energy. He's not playing any roses or anything like that. He's just playing the spinners. So green for spinner for the combo. You can like green for spinner counter gain, or the com as well. You can see there's 2 of in there. So you can try and make that Mimikyu happen all in the turn, which is cool. It's got the wait and see hammer in this list. So wait and see hammer's like been in and out of 60s. Like it's sometimes in Guardian, it's sometimes in this for Mirror. It's even made its way into Pikarom. So wait and see hammer of all things has actually started to make a bit of a mark on the format, I guess you could say. This 60 is not playing Faber, and it's only playing 2 Power Plants, so that seems pretty scary against Keldeo. I think that's kind of a concern for me, that you may not have many good answers to just Keldeo, like opposing ADP lists. Yeah, that's a bit of a strange one for me. Yeah, not many good answers there for Keldeo. But I guess that's just, it shows you the direction of the format. Many people were like moving away from just regular ADP because of concerns of like Trev Noir going into Malamar decks and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess it's a meta call more than anything else, and you get to play your own swells for, again, like disrupting good stadiums from opposing decks. So yeah, it's playing 4 reset stamp. It's really defensive in that regard. So it's interesting. Again, this is a deck that like top 8'd Latam, and then everyone decided that the Jirachi build was stronger, but still the odd result for the greens list here and there. So yeah, that rounds out the top 8. We don't have a nice graphic just yet on complexity, so keep an eye out for that. But we'll just have a quick brief look down. There was another high placing Baby Blacephalon in at 9th. More Blacephalon in the top 16, so that was clearly doing well. Tina Chomp Roxy and just Tina Chomp in general was kind of touted towards the end of the season as being like the Bediff by a lot of players, but doesn't have the results to back it up like at all, really. So that's a bit of an interesting one. I think overall the deck was kind of clunky in my eyes. I was iffy on the deck, but maybe it's just the fact that people are finding different ways to beat it. Previous world champion Kasaraga also making top 16 with a Keldeo-based build. You see a Dolls just falling short of top 16. A lot of Pikarom, actually. A good chunk of Pikarom doing well here. So a lot of them making day 2, actually. That's a really good showing for Pikarom overall. And then we see some Malamars and stuff down towards the bottom as well. A couple, or at least one more Tina Chomp. And we see ADP Bird Trio. That had a brief flicker, right, of hype. It was hyped out of like a low attendance special event, and yeah, it seemed to be more of a fun deck, I think, than a supremely competitive deck. But, you know, it can still be enough stuff to make its way to day 2, so yeah. Alright, let me know what you guys think of these tournament results. What was your favourite deck? What was your favourite deck in this format as we move into Sword and Shield? And what deck do you think does the best with the new changes? I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.